Republicans in both chambers of Congress continue to hold steady in negotiations, insisting that emergency spending for Ukraine must be coupled with sweeping changes to the Biden administration's mishandling of our southern border. Toward this end, the House already passed border security legislation, but Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer has called it a, quote, non-starter in the Senate. With Democrat sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago now overwhelmed by the flow of migrants, and new polls indicating Americans increasingly view illegal immigration as a national security issue, where will these negotiations go? Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Tim Burchett. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. He represents the 2nd Congressional District of Tennessee. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure.
So, Congressman, let's talk about these negotiations. Democrats reportedly, I was talking with Senator Langford on the Senate side, who's a part of the negotiations over there. Democrats walked out. Is this a negotiation strategy, or are they doubling down, saying no border security?
Well, they're openly Marxist, so I wouldn't doubt that this is what the line they'll draw in the sand. They want to destroy this country. To say we need border security is like saying we need oxygen and clean water. It's a foregone conclusion. The American public realizes it, and I think they realize they're just trying to stack the deck against America by allowing all these illegals in. And you know, I just heard the statistic about 100,000 kids that were unaccounted for coming over the border. I don't care your religious beliefs or whatever values you have, but 100,000 kids in the last 3 years that we don't know where they are, to me is and to not hear anything from the left, that is deafening. This whole town's corrupted. You and I know it. We've had this discussion before, but now it's just the cards are out and they know it, and the American public knows it, and they ought to be ashamed that we're not doing more for these kids.
So the Biden administration, I'm going to be very candid on this, Congressman, and I think you'll appreciate this. Anything that the Biden administration and the left embraces, I'm skeptical of. And, you know, they have never been strong on national security and the military. But now all of a sudden they've already given over $75 billion to Ukraine. They want another $70+ billion to go to Ukraine. And they're saying we got to do this now. We don't have time to address the border. But I mean, just thinking at it from a logical standpoint, our open border on the south, our southern border, is putting this nation and our future at risk. How are we going to help anybody if we're no longer here?
You know, you're talking about a country, literally Russia, whose GDP is somewhere between France and Canada. They're not what they were during Reagan's years, and we just keep funding these things. And you know, we've seen the money, how it's filtered back under certain people. And now the economists are saying, oh, wait a minute, we're investing money in America. These people are buying missile defense systems from American corporations. The Pentagon is. And then you look and see people in both parties, dadgummit, who own stock in these corporations. This is a very dangerous path we're on. It's the veil has been lifted. The American public sees it. We've given 114 billion unchecked dollars to one of the most corrupt nations in Europe. That's pretty hard to say. And then you see Europe's not doing its fair share. Germany and the rest of them, they're not giving hardly anything. And they'll say, oh, their figures are, well, we're opening our doors to refugees. That is our cost. And they're equating some of that. I mean, you look at this country, we're overrun with refugees. We don't equate that to anything other than our own stupidity. So the deck is clearly stacked against the American public right now. And this is what happens again when 20 million evangelical Christians decide to stay home on Election Day.
So true. Elections have consequences. Congressman Burchett, I want to ask you this question. You're on Foreign Affairs Committee. So I've heard this from many of our friends on Capitol Hill, and they're not opposed to helping Ukraine, but they'd like to know where the money's going, and they would like to know what the game plan is. Do you have the answers to those two questions?
Well, I'm one of those standing in line waiting for that answer. I met with a gentleman not long ago who just described some of the corruption and what the actual troops were having to do to get supplies, and then these things are being sold out from under them, and the money that's going to the oligarchs and all the leadership it's grotesque. And and you're seeing all this money that's gone through some of these people back to Hunter Biden. And, it's just too much. It's just too much. And I'd just like to know, I'd like some serious accounting. They pitched a fit when we talked about some serious accounting on this stuff, and we still don't really have it. And it's just going down this route. And to claim that, America, if we don't stand up, Russia's going to fall. Well, Europe ought to stand up, because Europe seems to be the one that's standing in its direct path, not the United States of America. And when we disregard our own border, when we have a country without borders, you cease to become a country. And that's what we're doing right now.
Do you see Republicans dug in on this issue, that there will be no funding for the Biden administration's efforts in Ukraine without significant changes at our southern border?
I see some people dug in, but I see the rest just saying they don't care. They just want to go home for Christmas. And and I think people ought to start holding their people accountable. Honestly do, because you're going to see, so they run home and tell their people that, but their votes sure don't show that line of thought. So I would hope, what really needs to happen, just need to be separate bills. Why is that a problem? Put separate bills up and let them fall or go. They tried to attach it to Israel funding, the same thing.
Right.
It just doesn't need to. I'm a believer that we're here. As I said, we got to rush to Washington because these post offices won't name themselves. I mean, we're not doing anything. We haven't done anything the last 5 years. Let's do some meaningful legislation. Divide those things up. Let's let us look at all the numbers, and then we'll make a decision then.
Well, that's what the
3 bills: Israel, the border, and Ukraine.
Well, the House did that. The House passed funding for Israel, offset with taking money back from creating more IRS thugs, and that's being set on over in the Senate.
Yes, sir. And I think we ought to continue to let the American public know that. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that's always, I get back home, people are saying, well, why aren't you doing this? Well, we already did it. We already have voted for border security. Chuck Schumer refused to do it. In his own state, the governor of and the mayor of New York have pleaded with the Biden White House, do not send any more of these people up here. We cannot handle it. They're kicking veterans, they're kicking their own citizens out of shelters, and then they're allowing homeless. Here in Washington, D.C., of all places, they're doing that at a dorm or at a college. They're kicking people out of the college, of their dorms, so they can allow homeless people to settle in there. It's out of control. This is anarchy, and this is, again, 20 million folks decided to stay home on Election Day.
And the issue is it can be fixed. The Trump administration had stopped the flow across the border. And it's not so much the migrants, and I'm not disagreeing with you, it's not so much the migrants in New York City, and that's a problem. I'll be very candid. I'm more concerned about those who are sneaking across this border to do harm to this country. And
I've seen they're starting to get reports, which we've said for a couple of years now, that there's Chinese coming across the border. Now, why are they coming? They sure had to come a long way. We're not talking about somebody who's in Central America could just walk up they had to get over here by a boat or something. Now, what are they doing here? Do we know where they're at? And why are all these people on the terrorist watch list we keep finding? What about the ones we're not finding? And why are they here? I think we could be in for a big surprise if we're not careful. And it would be a very dangerous situation for this country.
Unfortunately, Congressman Burchett, I think you're correct. Congressman, always great to see you. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Hey, I wanted to invite you to my Christmas party. On the 12th, it's only 16 minutes this year. Last year, it was 15 minutes. And there'll be no alcohol. There'll be a peanut butter and jelly bar, and I'll have Mountain Dew, and I'll have a charcuterie board, which is me with crackers and cheese whiz. It only lasts 16 minutes. Last year was 15 minutes. We can't squeeze it all in. But you know good and well, you go to a Christmas party, you're sitting there eating a stale hors d'oeuvre that your friend probably froze from last year's that nobody would eat.
Let me go.
And you got to have a conversation.
Let me go put it on my schedule.